On our wedding anniversary, my husband leaned across the table, smiled like he was about to give me diamonds, and said, "I've decided to take a second wife." Then she walked in. It was supposed to be one of those nights you circle on the calendar and think about all year. The kind of night that feels like pressing pause on everything else in life: work deadlines, grocery lists, bills, laundry. So you can just be together. Our wedding anniversary, in the past, we'd never gone overboard. And honestly, that was part of the charm. One year, he surprised me with a framed photo from our honeymoon, the one where we were laughing so hard we could barely keep the camera steady. My hair was a mess. His shirt was wrinkled, but you could see it in our faces. We were happy another year. It was a dinner at our favorite little Italian place, the kind with candles stuck in old wine bottles, and a waiter who always remembered our order before we even opened the menu. It wasn't about diamonds or luxury trips. It was about thoughtfulness, about him knowing exactly what would make me smile without me having to say a word. But this year felt different in the weeks leading up to the date. He'd been acting strangely more secretive, always keeping his phone close face down on the table screen. Dim the second I walked into the room, when I'd casually ask, "Who are you texting?" He'd shrug, say, "Just work," and throw in this little smirk that didn't match the words. And it wasn't just the phone, it was in his body language. He carried himself differently, like a man with a secret he couldn't wait to reveal. He'd hum while making coffee in the mornings, check the time more than usual, and every now and then, I'd catch him looking at me with this oddly self satisfied grin. I told myself it had to be a surprise. Something romantic. Maybe he'd finally booked the trip. I'd been hinting about Santorini, the one with whitewashed villas and turquoise waters. I'd shown him 100 times. Maybe he'd reserved a table at that rooftop restaurant downtown, the one that's always booked months in advance, or maybe, and this one made my chest ache in the best way. Maybe he wanted to renew our vows. I could almost see it barefoot on a beach, the wind in my hair, the sound of waves and laughter, but there was also a knot in my stomach, small, tight, because his excitement didn't feel like anticipation. It felt performative, like someone rehearsing a scene they already knew the ending to. By the time the night arrived, he was practically buzzing. We sat across from each other at the table, candles flickering between us plates, still half full. He leaned forward, eyes bright, and said, "I have a special surprise for you." He drew out the words, savoring them, like each syllable was some rare delicacy, something that's going to take our marriage to the next level. My mind lit up: a trip, jewelry, a vow renewal. I smiled already, halfway to gratitude. "Okay, I'm listening." That's when his grin widened and he dropped the match. "I've decided to take a second wife." I blinked. The words didn't compute, I'm sorry. What before I could fully process it? The sound of heels clicked against the floor. A woman stepped into the dining room like she'd been waiting just off stage for her cue. Younger, pretty hair, perfectly styled dress, like something out of a fashion spread. She was smiling, not nervously, not apologetically, but with the easy confidence of someone who knew she belonged in this scene. He turned toward her, voice warm. "This is Layla. We've been talking for a while, and she's agreed to join our family." My fork was still in my hand. Mid-air, my pulse thundered in my ears. The younger woman glanced at me, her smile softening slightly, like she thought this was a gift I'd be grateful for a split second. I actually laughed, a short, startled sound. I couldn't hold back. "Okay, funny. What's the real surprise?" But neither of them laughed. Layla stayed perfectly still, perfectly poised, and his smile didn't budge. The laugh died in my throat. "Wait, you're serious?" He nodded, leaning back in his chair, like we were discussing something as ordinary as replacing the dishwasher. "I know it's a lot to take in, but this is something I've always wanted. It's cultural, spiritual for me. A tradition I've always respected, even if I haven't talked about it much." My skin prickled. A second wife is a tradition you've always respected since when? He kept his tone maddeningly calm, like he was explaining an upgrade to our cable package. "Look, this is a gift for both of us. She can help around the house, take some of the pressure off. You won't have to do everything alone anymore. We'll be a team, a family, a gift." He was presenting another woman on our anniversary as if she were some kind of practical appliance, while the candles burned between us while our wine sat untouched. My mouth opened, but no words came because in that moment I knew this wasn't a joke. He thought I'd thank him for this. My chair scraped hard against the floor. Why didn't you talk to me about this? You don't just drop something like, this honored. I could barely breathe. You bring another woman into our marriage without a word, and I'm supposed to thank you. Layla shifted her weight, clasping her hands in front of her. She wasn't smiling anymore. Her gaze flicked between us. And for the first time, she looked uneasy, but he didn't notice or didn't care. He just leaned back, arms folded, watching me like I was overreacting. The air in the room felt heavy, hot. I grabbed my bag and stood. I didn't want to hear another word. Not from him, not from her. The door slammed behind me, the sound echoing down the street. The cool night air hit my skin like a slap. And for the first time in our marriage, I knew I wasn't coming back. If she leaves by the second day, the shock had burned away, leaving something sharper clarity. There was no repairing this. Even if I stayed, every glance, every word, every touch would be tainted by that moment at the table. I went back to the house when I knew he'd be at work. I didn't take everything, just what I needed to live without him. Clothes, important papers, my grandmother's jewelry, the wedding album I knew I'd probably never open again, but couldn't leave behind. I called a lawyer before I'd even finished packing. Irreconcilable differences felt like a cruel understatement, but it was the cleanest way to put it on paper when I finally walked out. The house looked exactly the same, but it wasn't mine anymore. I set my key on the counter. It felt like it weighed 100 pounds. I took one last look at the life I thought we had, then closed the door for good that night. I cried deep, ugly sobs, but beneath it all was something steady, solid resolve. He could keep his gift. I was taking back my freedom if she stays. I didn't leave, not right away. Maybe I wanted to prove something to him, to myself, or maybe I wasn't ready to torch the life we'd built without first trying to set boundaries. I told him if Layla stayed there would be rules. No blindsiding me with decisions, no pretending my voice didn't matter. He agreed too quickly, and I knew deep down that he was just waiting for me to calm down and fall in line. The problem was, trust doesn't grow back just because you declare a truce. I felt it every time he glanced at his phone, every time Layla lingered in a doorway, every time I heard them laughing in another room. Resentment became my shadow. I smiled for appearances, but inside, I was counting every slight, every reminder that my marriage wasn't mine anymore. The worst part, he thought I was adjusting, that the storm had passed, but what was growing inside me wasn't acceptance. It was distance in the weeks that followed. I kept replaying everything in my head, as if combing through the past might explain the present. The red flags had been there, quiet at first, easy to excuse his sudden late nights at work that didn't match his calendar, the way he'd shield his phone like it was state property, the small but telling financial changes, money moved around, expenses he brushed off as business, even his new, almost cocky confidence, like a man rehearsing for a victory speech. I told myself it was stress, a rough patch, a man planning a surprise, but love doesn't survive deceit. You can patch it, deny it, dress it up in pretty words, but once trust is gone, it's not love anymore. It's just a performance you put on for the world. He thought he was giving me the gift of sisterhood. What he really gave me was freedom. I used to think anniversaries were a measure of love. Now I know they're just markers in time, reminders of where you were, who you were, and how much can change in the space of 12 months this year on what would have been our anniversary. I woke up alone, and it didn't feel empty. It felt light. My mornings aren't filled with the sound of someone else's footsteps or the weight of wondering what secret they're carrying. Instead, there's sunlight on my walls, coffee brewing in my own kitchen, and a peace I didn't realize I'd been craving for years. The first months after leaving were the hardest. I'd moved into a small apartment. Nothing fancy, just a one-bedroom with creaky floors and a balcony barely big enough for a chair. But it was mine. I could breathe there. I cried a lot in the beginning, not because I wanted him back, but because grief has a way of showing up, even when you've made the right choice. You don't just lose the person, you lose the future you thought you were building. There were nights I'd catch myself setting the table for two out of habit, or I'd hear a song from our honeymoon playlist in a grocery store and feel my chest tighten. But somewhere along the way, the memories stopped hurting so sharply, they became just pieces of a story. Not my whole story. I started traveling on my own, first short trips, a weekend by the coast, a couple of days in the mountains. Then further, I went to Italy, to that little candlelit restaurant we'd once loved, sat alone at a corner table and ordered exactly what we used to, except this time. I didn't have to share my dessert. The waiter didn't recognize me, and that felt right. That life was over. Work got better too. I stopped shrinking myself to fit into a marriage that didn't value me. And without even trying, I started doing better at my job. I got promoted, bought myself the necklace I'd once hinted to him about. Every now and then, mutual friends would bring him up, usually in a careful tiptoeing kind of way. Apparently, he and Layla didn't last. One friend told me she'd left after less than 6 months. I didn't ask why I didn't need to. The truth is, I don't think about him much anymore. He's just a chapter. I closed, not the whole book. And today, on the anniversary of the night, he tried to hand me my own humiliation wrapped up as a gift. I'm sitting on my balcony with a glass of wine, watching the city lights. Come on. I don't miss the marriage. I don't miss the man. What I miss sometimes is the version of me who still believed love was safe. But I like this version of me more. She's harder to fool. Last year, he thought he was giving me a second wife. What he really gave me was a second chance at a life that's entirely mine.